If you were forced to play a game of werewolf in real life where you have to murder the other players or else you die, what would you do? I'm going to break down mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the high school death game in Werewolf Game Villager Side. All of these students will have to murder each other just to survive. Iori here wakes up next to her friend Naoko in a dark room with no idea where they are or how they got here. They both check their phones, but quickly realize that neither of them can get a signal. As the other students wake up, this pretty boy Takeshi walks through the door to try and find out where the hell they are, and the others follow him into a huge room where they find a circle of chairs arranged in front of a television set. This boy inserts a tape into the VCR, and the TV suddenly turns itself on. Displayed on the screen is a message telling them they're forbidden from leaving the building and must now play a werewolf game. This kid warns the others not to step through the doorway, and they all gather to read the message as the TV tells them that these 10 students will be split into 2 teams. 8 of them will be villagers, and their goal is to find and kill the werewolves during the day, while 2 students will be werewolves, and their goal is to kill 1 villager each night. Every student has been given a card to tell them which team they're on, and with that, the television goes blank. The students are confused and think it's just a stupid prank, but then they're told that they've been given a bottle of potassium cyanide poison to help them kill each other. Realizing this is not a joke, each student begins to check their pockets for their role cards, and this girl discovers that she's been given the role of a villager. Every night, she might get killed by a werewolf, but her friend finds this ridiculous. She refuses to play this game and opens the door to leave the building, but that was her last mistake. Suddenly, blood sprays out of her neck, and the other students are completely shocked. They can't believe that this death game is really happening, and this is only the beginning of an absolute bloodbath. Okay, this death game just turned this girl into a Jackson Pollock painting, and all she did was take 1 step out the door. That means if we break any rules, it's instant death for us, which is a horrifying realization. Now, instead of being frozen in terror like all of these students, we need to use that fear as a motivator to survive. Whoever starts strategizing is going to have a much better chance at winning, and from what we know so far, it all comes down to what role card you have. Now, the rules forbid us from looking at other people's cards, but we might be able to find clues about who the werewolves are by gauging everyone's emotional responses. The villagers have to worry about getting murdered each night by the werewolves, so it makes sense for them to look more worried when they see their card. But since the wolves are the ones doing the killing, then they might have a different reaction, like they're trying to hide something. We need to look for any signs of suspicious behavior, and that brings me to this girl right here. Earlier, everyone woke up in the same room, but while they were reading the rules, this girl came in from a separate door 5 minutes late. She didn't ask any questions or even look surprised to find other people here, which is not normal behavior given the situation. I think it's pretty clear she might know more than anyone else, and I would be following her for the rest of the day to study her behavior, because I think it will tell us something useful. This is exactly why the first person to understand it's a competition for survival is going to come out on top, because you'll be quicker to notice details just like this one. Now, as far as the other players, we can actually find out a lot about their personalities just by observing their positions in the room. The students who stay furthest away are most likely to be introverted and shy away from conflict or decision making. In the front, the person who's reading the rules out loud is a natural-born leader and wants to understand the situation. This is really useful information because they haven't looked at their cards yet, so we know that they're being true to their personalities in this moment. The werewolves will have to be very manipulative in this game and constantly lie in order to evade suspicion from the group. But if you realize that one of these shy players starts talking a lot more, it's going to help you figure out that they're acting suspiciously. We won't be able to notice a change in personality like this unless we have something to base it on. So it's absolutely essential that we use this moment here as a reference, because it will help us observe any changes in their behavior later in the game, and that lets us draw conclusions about what cards they are most likely to have. Takeshi here comes over to inspect the dead body and notices something on the girl's neck. Realizing what this means, he reaches up to find a rod sticking out from underneath his skin. The other players touch their own necks to find they all have one, and it's implanted deep inside of them. They could all die just like the girl if they leave the building, and they're trapped here with no one around to help them. Splitting up, some of the students gather at the front entrance to try screaming for help. It's a hopeless cause, and there's no one around for miles, but that's when the nerdy kid has a clever idea. Walking back into the voting room, he tells the villager Irie that he has a plan. If they throw her friend's body outside of the building, someone might find it and come in to save them, but the girl is shocked. She can't believe they would suggest such a thing, and as the group tries to take her friend out of the room, the girl starts to break down. She tries to fight them off as they carry the body out, but it's their best and only chance of finding help. At the front entrance, they toss the dead girl through the doorway and leave her there as the villager breaks down in tears. But it's time for them to realize that the only way out of here alive is to play the werewolf game and win. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, the rest of the players have gathered to strategize about the game. Tonight, they'll all have to decide who they think the werewolf is, and Fumi here suggests that the four of them should agree on who to kill, so they'll be safe in tonight's vote. It's a clever strategy, but this kid Tomohiro points out that someone here could be a werewolf. Fumi here defends his idea, saying that at least they'd all survive past the vote, and there's no guarantee to discover a werewolf in the first round. This girl compliments him on how smart he is, and the boy brags that he's actually a Werewolf Game pro. Everyone seems impressed, but his plan is about to go terribly wrong. Okay, this kid is sneaky as hell, and I absolutely love it. He's already working the game to his advantage by gathering a small group of players to build a secret strategy. He knows that if he can control their votes, he's going to stay alive. But there's one huge problem with this plan. Right now, Fumi here is drawing too much attention to himself, and that's really dangerous because it can backfire. In a werewolf game, nobody can be trusted, and if people get the impression that you're trying to manipulate them, they're going to suspect that you're the werewolf. Fumi has also admitted that he's an expert at this game, and that's a horrible idea, because if a werewolf is sitting at this table, he's just made himself their primary target. An expert player is going to be better at discovering who the werewolves are, and there's no way to let him stay alive for very long. Now, having said that, it's definitely important to try and gather votes to make sure you survive, but we need to be more tactful with our approach. The best way to manipulate others without drawing suspicion is to do all the logic building for them and let them reach the conclusions on their own. If you say just enough to let people think that everything is their idea, then when shit hits the fan, it's not going to fall on you. Now, the other group is in denial here and think that escaping is still their best chance at survival. I'm all for this because it's important to explore all of our options, but throwing a girl's dead body 3 feet away from the entrance in order to get help is just about the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Frankly, if they insist on using the girl's dead body to get outside help, then they should have at least put some wheels on her. The better version of this terrible idea would have been to use this TV cart here and roll her body further down the road. If you look here, you can see that the building is on a slope, so she'll roll further down where there might be more cars. This would be much better than dumping the poor girl 3 feet from the entrance, but it's not even their best option. Look at how remote this place is. We're completely stranded in the middle of the woods, so the only signal that anyone will spot from miles away is fire. Now, they don't have a stove or any lighters in this kitchen, but that doesn't make this impossible. One of the 10 players here wears eyeglasses, and if we use them to focus the sunlight onto a piece of paper, we'll be able to start a fire. If there's a way of getting to the roof without leaving the building, then it makes the most sense to bring as many flammable items out and wait until night so we can set them ablaze. It's obviously a dangerous strategy, but since these players here don't believe they need to play the game yet, it's their best and only chance at calling for help. The group meets up in the classroom where the nerd writes down everyone's names on the chalkboard. They're trying to figure out why they've been selected to play in this death game, and that's when Marie here admits she's the older sister of this girl Kunomi. They have the same last name, and the group isn't surprised, but nobody realized that this admission was a huge disadvantage and could end the game. As the others continue to discuss their connections, this kid Tomohiro won't stop staring at Airi, and he decides to introduce himself. He asks the girl's name, but she's too traumatized to open up. Finally, she tells everyone her name, and they figure out that she follows this nerd here on Twitter because he's an activist. But other than this, no one else has any connection to each other. They're all strangers trapped in this game, and the only way to escape is to kill. That night, the first voting session begins. This girl Hitomi asks the arrogant kid about why he called himself a pro earlier, and he explains that he's played the card game before, but never in a death game like this. He tells them there should be more roles like a seer, who has the special ability to find out the role of one player each night. But since this is the first round, no one can be sure who among them is a werewolf. They have only 30 minutes left to decide who to vote for, because if they don't kill someone by 9 PM, the rules state that all of them will die. That's when Airi here finally realizes they have to actually murder someone with their own hands, and scolds them all for even considering it as an option, but the girl is being naive. Angry, Hitomi here stands up and grabs her by the collar. If she doesn't want to play the game, then she's better off dead. Dragging the girl towards the door, she's about to throw her out of the building when Tomohiro rushes in to stop her, saving Airi's life. Okay, this girl is being really naive, and refusing to cooperate makes her an instant liability to the whole group. Everyone will die if she doesn't vote, so the girl needs to be dealt with, but it also doesn't make sense to vote for her execution. Since we know that she's a villager and the wolves will have to kill someone tonight, I would suggest that we sacrifice her as a peace offering and everyone else can survive into the next round. Now as villagers, we have a very interesting dilemma here because our numbers can actually work against us if we're not careful. Remember that we started with 8 villagers and only 2 werewolves. So as a villager, voting without evidence would give us a 78% chance of accidentally killing someone on our team out of the 9 other players. In this case, we have 1 girl already dead, and if she was a villager, we now have a 75% chance of killing another villager with our vote out of the 8 remaining players. Every time we do this, we are hurting our own chances of winning by killing another villager, which is exactly what a werewolf wants to happen, and it's why we need good evidence to back up our decisions. Now, if we can see what strategies the wolves have at their disposal, then we can anticipate their decisions and avoid falling into their traps. For starters, the wolves will want to sow chaos into the group as soon as possible, because the more emotional we all are, the easier it is for us to be manipulated to vote without using logic or reason. That means as villagers, we need to be very careful not to start killing based on our emotions. These 2 girls getting into a fight is the exact opposite of what we need right now, but it also tells us what their roles are. A werewolf doesn't want to draw that kind of attention to themselves, so they're both more likely to be villagers. If we also assume that the first girl who died was a villager, then taking these 3 girls out of consideration gives us a better statistical advantage that we can pick a werewolf to kill. We also wouldn't vote for ourselves, so with 2 wolves among 6 other players remaining, that's a 33% chance of finding a werewolf at random. I would also want to protect this pro here, because if he has more insight into the game, then he's going to be incredibly valuable to helping the villagers win. We can't be sure he's not a werewolf, but his knowledge and experience makes him worth the risk. Now that we've narrowed down our selection to 5 players, we can figure out who among them we have more reason to be suspicious of. Since werewolves are only killed during votes, then they're probably going to appear on their best behavior to avoid negative attention. That means the nicest and friendliest people are the ones you should be the most suspicious of. If any of these players start sounding too friendly, it might be a telltale sign that they're a werewolf, and they should be interrogated. With time running out, Fumi the Pro tells everyone to point at who they think the werewolf is, and on the count of 3, the group votes. The older sister got 2 votes, the pro got 2 votes, Takeshi got 2 votes, the nerd and the villager both got 1 vote, but that's when they all realize Irie here voted for no one. By refusing to play, she's putting all their lives in danger, and the nerd begs her to break the tie. Reluctantly, Irie here agrees, and on the count of 3, they all point their fingers for the second time. Everyone casts the same vote as before, except Irie, who has decided to vote for the nerd. It takes him by complete surprise, and he lashes out at her for not breaking the tie. That's when this girl reveals that earlier, Fumi had a secret meeting where he tried convincing them to vote against Takeshi here, and this one statement turns the whole group against him. This girl reminds them that 3 different students all got equal votes again, and they still need a tiebreaker. On the count of 3, everyone points their fingers, and it's no surprise who they've chosen. 7 players vote for Fumi the pro, Fumi votes for the pretty boy Takeshi, and the villager Irie votes for herself. The boy starts to break down into tears, realizing he's going to die, and there's nothing he can say or do to stop it. Some of the players go to a back room where a bottle of cyanide has been left for them, and they look at the instructions. It will take 5 minutes for the poison to kill their victims, but warns that if they're not careful, even slight contact with this poison will kill them. Fumi here is so terrified that he wets his pants and begs the villager girl to help him, but she's too traumatized to do anything about it. The boy suddenly goes for broke and tries to escape, but the others manage to catch him and pin him to the ground. The older sister Marie prepares the poison, and they try to force the poor kid to drink it, but he thrashes around desperate to survive. Finally, the boy surrenders to his fate and runs out of the room to die like the first girl, and that's now 2 players down with 8 to go. Okay, I gotta say, trying to kill someone with potassium cyanide is a really terrible idea. First of all, when they read the instructions, it told them that even slight contact with this poison is enough to kill you. And since we can't expect the victim to cooperate, force-feeding him poison is extremely dangerous to the other players. It's very likely that the chemicals will splash on the others, killing anyone that gets enough on them. Just because the game provided it for us doesn't mean we have to use it. And it would have been much smarter to push him out the door and let the death game do the job for us. Right now it's 8 against 1. And even if he resists, we won't be risking our lives in the process. Now, from the other perspective, if I was this kid who's supposed to die, the fact that they're deciding to use poison is actually a blessing in disguise. Instead of literally peeing his pants, he should have been looking for an opportunity to knock this tray of cyanide into their faces. The rules stated that each night they have to kill the person they voted for, but there might be a way to hack this. If we manage to kill someone else by splashing them with their own poison, then we can convince the group to revote and point to the dead body as an easy way to finish the round. Now, even at the point where he was being poisoned, he still might have had a chance to survive if he was using his brain. Potassium cyanide is composed of carbon-nitrogen ions that are extremely toxic to the human body. But a common emergency treatment for cyanide poisoning is activated charcoal, because it attracts those toxic ions and absorbs them away from your body. It might be a long shot, but if I was minutes away from death, instead of running out the door and quitting, I would run to the kitchen to look inside the fridge for activated charcoal. Many Asian countries use this to deodorize their fridges, and I'd definitely eat it if I thought it would save my life. Suddenly, a VHS pops out of the tape player, and the TV tells them that from midnight to 6 a.m., the villagers must stay in their rooms while the werewolves come out to kill one player. It then says that one of the villagers has a special role called the Seer, who can choose one player's role to reveal each night. The nerd realizes this can help them find out who the werewolves are, but they have no idea who the Seer could be. Later, the group meets in the back room to prepare for the werewolf attack, and the older sister suggests they should all try to listen for the wolves' voices to figure out who they are. Takeshi here asks whoever the werewolves are to not kill anyone tonight so they can all buy time to escape, but Tomohiro explains that it's an impossible request. If the werewolves don't kill each night, then they will both die as a punishment and lose the game. Later that night, all the players go to their rooms to sleep, but the villager Irie is hiding under her bed. She's terrified of being killed by the wolves, but suddenly a gunshot rings out from another room. Someone's just been murdered, and the girl's relieved that they didn't choose her. The next morning, she joins the others to find the dead body of the quiet boy Yuhei in his bed, and it's gruesome. The pretty boy tells her they checked the other rooms, but couldn't find the gun that shot him. Tomohiro leaves the room, and the villager is about to follow him, but she's warned that he might be a werewolf. Later, they drag the body out of the room and dump it outside the building. That afternoon, the villager is about to enter her room when she's stopped by the nerd who invites her to a private meeting. The three gather in the kitchen, where the boy tells him he's discovered some answers. The last victim must have been a villager since he was killed, and if both of the other two players that died were villagers too, he thinks the werewolves could win in 3 days' time. He begs Irie here to tell them if she has any clue who the wolves are, but the girl stays quiet. Marie here asks how he knows that they aren't werewolves, and he tells her it's a risk he needed to take if they want any chance of winning. Okay, this is the dumbest nerd I've ever seen. He randomly trusted two girls without vetting their roles, and it's going to get him killed. If he had done the math, he would have realized that with only 7 players in the game right now, and 3 villagers eliminated, the combined chances that at least one of these girls is a werewolf is 60%. And when your very life is hanging in the balance, those are terrible odds to gamble with. The truth is, these private conversations are the death game equivalent of Russian roulette, and even if it can help you win the game, it requires too much luck to consider it an effective strategy. Now, the safest way to figure out who the werewolves are is in the next voting round. And since the wolves just killed someone last night, we can turn that into a huge advantage if we know what to look for. For starters, we can predict that the werewolves are going to protect their fellow wolf, so they will never vote for each other. When there's not a lot of information to go on, it would be very suspicious to have one person constantly defending someone else, and it's an immediate red flag. We can also expect the werewolves to be the only ones in the group to intentionally mislead others. This will often mean that the wolves will either be the most accusatory or the most vocal, but they will never seem to be neutral or looking for fairness. Lastly, we can tell a lot from everyone's facial expressions, because to keep a deadly secret like this is not an easy burden to carry. Even though a werewolf can rationalize their actions for survival, the guilt of murdering someone in cold blood is going to reflect in their physical appearance. Someone in this room shot another student in the head, and that's not something that you can easily hide. So anyone who looks burdened or avoids eye contact should be considered a suspect. With this strategy, we could easily convince the others to vote against whoever is showing these physical symptoms, and it's logical enough to help swing the vote. Now, when the group starts to agree with our theory, the other wolf is going to be defending their partner as much as possible, and that means we can catch the other werewolf too. If all goes well, finding those detailed signals of trauma can be enough to turn this entire game around, and we don't have to risk our lives in any private conversation like this guy did. That night, the second voting session begins, and the older sister here decides to announce that she has the seer role. She claims that she checked the nerdy kid yesterday to discover that he's a werewolf, and that's the only reason she's chosen to finally reveal her role. The nerd insists he's a villager, and this false accusation could only mean that she's the wolf. The group doesn't know who to trust, but that's when Takeshi here declares that he's the real seer and that Marie is lying. Everyone is surprised by this, but the older sister takes it personally, yelling that he and the nerd must both be werewolves. The boy challenges her to tell the group exactly how the seer's ability works, and if she can't, then it will prove that she's lying. but the girl is quick to answer. Between 12 to 2 a.m., she can use the TV in her room to choose one player and find out their role, and also has a special symbol on her card. The pretty boy is completely caught off guard and can't understand how she could possibly know this. Desperate, he swears to the group that he's really the seer, but the big sister suggests that he's trying to protect the nerdy kid because they're both werewolves. Angry, he pushes her out of the circle, but Tomohiro here rushes in to calm them down. With only 30 minutes left on the clock, the group decides to vote. 4 people vote for the nerd, 2 people vote for the older sister, and the villager votes for herself, making the nerd the 4th victim of the game. After the vote, they clear the room to prepare the poison. No one wants to execute this kid, and he tells them he's terrified of dying. Tomohiro apologizes and begins to cry with guilt, but none of them have a choice. The group is about to force the nerd to drink the poison, but he suddenly panics, bolting out of the chair and towards the stairs. He's caught by the other players, who wrestle him to the ground, and the villager tries to protect him, but it's no use. They finally manage to poison the nerd, and the group watches with tears in their eyes as the next victim passes away. Everyone is dead quiet, and the younger sister angrily walks up to the television set before throwing it to the floor, smashing it to pieces, knowing that tonight someone else will die. Okay, this was a masterclass in stupidity, because the group had plenty of signs that pointed to Marie being a werewolf. The first problem here is that claiming to be the seer is an extremely dangerous thing to do. Other versions of the werewolf game have a bodyguard role, which can protect one player each night, but this version doesn't have one. Since a seer is the only person that can discover another player's role, then this makes them the biggest threat to the werewolf's chances of winning. With nobody to protect you, revealing yourself to be the seer is a death wish, which is why Marie's admission here is very suspicious. The only logical explanation for painting a target on her back like this is if she is actually a werewolf because she has no fear of getting murdered. This is a common werewolf tactic to gain the other's trust before the true seer reveals themselves. And if the villagers had been more focused on the game's dynamics instead of getting caught up in the drama, they could have easily predicted this would happen. Now, there was one more thing these villagers could have done to prove that Marie isn't telling the truth, and that's keeping track of everyone's votes in each round. The night before, this nerdy kid voted for the pretty boy, and since a werewolf would never vote for the other wolf, this would prove that they're both villagers. It's also important to realize that the pretty boy is now defending the person who had previously accused him of being the werewolf, which wouldn't make any sense unless he had true information to back it up. Keeping track of the votes here could have changed this whole game and exposed one of the werewolves, but instead they used their emotions to make their decisions, and now they're screwed. Later, the group moves the nerd's corpse out of the voting room to dump it outside. The older sister tells the villager that since she didn't vote for the nerd, the girl can't be trusted. She warns her to make the right decision in the next round or else they'll lose the game and it's going to be her fault. After dumping the body, the girl realizes nobody trusts her and starts to cry. Tomohiro reassures her that everything is going to work out just as it's meant to, but she's going to find out that this kid is hiding a dangerous secret. The next morning, the players find that this girl Hitomi has been killed by the werewolves. Upstairs, the younger sister comes to knock on the villager's door because she's figured something out. The other girl shows her a diagram of how the votes were distributed in each round so far, and that's when Irie begins to see a pattern emerge. Analyzing all the voting records, she realizes that werewolves will never vote for each other and would instead both target a single person. But on the first night, the nerd voted for Takeshi. That means they're both most likely villagers, and Konomi here realizes that her sister must really be a werewolf. Since they're on opposite teams, only one of these girls will be able to win the game, and the little sister breaks down crying. That night, the third voting session begins, and they find a brand new TV sitting on the stand. In tears, the older sister admits she's a werewolf and has decided to reveal her role to sacrifice herself so her sister can live. It's a noble gesture, but then she drops a bombshell on the group and claims this guy Tomohiro is the other werewolf. He denies the accusation, but Marie insists he was with her for each killing. In tears, she tells everyone that she just wants to keep her sister safe, and her original plan was to get Tomohiro killed once people believed she was a seer. The boy can't believe what he's hearing, but with time running out, the players decide to vote. 2 people vote for Tomohiro, and 3 people vote for Marie. Okay, this was unexpected. Marie here just tanked the werewolf's chances of winning by giving herself up, and she's doing it to save her sister here, who is a villager. This is a very honorable thing to do, but there's one catch. She's accusing this boy Tomohiro of being the other werewolf, but we can't guarantee that we can trust her, and here's why. In the previous round, Marie claimed to be the seer, which means she was most likely to get killed by the werewolves, but since she wasn't murdered, it made her look suspicious. She knew this would blow her cover and was going to get killed in the next vote no matter what. If that's the case, then it's still logical to consider the possibility that her sister could be the second werewolf and she's misdirecting the group to keep her sister alive. Now, there are two things we can do to reveal who the second werewolf is, and the first is the voting record. If the werewolves were smart, then they probably voted for the same person each night because it would give them a higher chance of having the majority vote. The records would clearly show who among the remaining players voted the same every time, and if either of these two suspects voted differently, it's a good sign that they're just a villager. Now, the second way we can reveal the other werewolf is by observing how people behave during the day. Tomohiro has been acting very nice towards Airi and doing everything he can to help her feel comfortable. While this seems innocent, these are the telltale signs of manipulation tactics. He's gone out of his way to gain the trust of this girl to make himself appear non-threatening, and it's a brilliant strategy to help swing the votes away from him. He's also been relatively quiet in each voting session and only makes contributions when it's expected of him. These are the actions of someone who is trying to avoid suspicion at all cost, and it lines up perfectly with Morie's claim that he's the second werewolf. With all that in mind, we still have a problem. Killing Marie will get the villagers one step closer to winning, but there's one more werewolf remaining. Tomohiro is going to kill another villager tonight, and that's why I would use this opportunity to test the game. The rules said that we have to vote for who the werewolf is and kill them, but it didn't say anything about only being allowed to kill one player each night. I would suggest to the remaining villagers that we should cast a second vote and choose Tomohiro to kill him tonight as well. And since it's following the rules exactly as they've been written, it's worth trying. The players prepare the poison for the older sister, and Tomohiro mockingly tells her she should have confessed earlier if she didn't want so many people to die. Angry, the girl gets up to reveal that this is her and Tomohiro's second werewolf game. That's how she knew so much about the seer rule, because even though they won the last game, they've been forced to play again. Knowing she'll die soon, the girl comforts her little sister, and it's a heartbreaking moment. But that's when Tomohiro here suddenly accuses the younger sister Konomi of being a werewolf. He makes the case that the only reason she's sacrificing herself is to hide her sister's identity and help her win the game as the last wolf. The older sister tells him he's lying, but the kid makes a compelling point, and the others start to believe him. Airi brings the bottle of poison over to the werewolf, but the little sister throws it across the room in anger. The villager has to slap the girl to calm down, and Airi reminds her they have to kill her big sister if they all want to survive. Freaking out, she attacks the villager and has to be held down to the floor, stopping Konomi from saving her sister. All she can do is watch as Tomohiro stands over Marie and splashes poison all over her face. The next morning, the players wake up to find that Takeshi is the next player to be killed, and Tomohiro's face is covered in bruises. It's clear that he killed a pretty boy last night who must have put up a fight, and the villager asks why he didn't use the gun. Feeling guilty, the boy bursts into tears and apologizes to the younger sister for accusing her of being a wolf. Later, they go to the building's entrance and push the werewolf outside, fully intent on letting him get killed by the device in his neck. The villager watches the boy go into a full sprint as he leaves the complex and past the gates, but he only makes it so far before his device activates and the boy finally dies from blood loss. But this is only the end of the first round. It's the most depressing news you could ask for, and the girls wash the blood off their clothing as they prepare for what's to come. Sometime later, the villager is woken up when a new batch of players pass by. Checking her pocket, she discovers that this time, she and the little sister are both werewolves. Hardened by her trauma, the new wolf enters the voting room and prepares to show them that she's finally ready to play. But what do you think? How would you beat Werewolf Game Villager side? Let me know with a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, leave a like and subscribe, and check out the How to Beat playlist for more videos like this. Until next time, have a damn good day.